Okay, I'm so excited because today I am going to freak out about books in the best way possible, which is something that I absolutely love to do. So basically, hi, welcome to Callie's Kingdom. I get ahead of myself a lot, but subscribe if you like this content about books. Now that it's summer, I'm going to post a lot more videos, so get excited. But anyway, what's going to happen is I'm going to tell you 4 standalone books that I think need more hype and 4 series that I think that need more hype. So these are books that I don't hear people talking about and that I loved. Basically, minimum requirement was like getting rated 4.5 stars to be on this list, but I think most of these books are actually 5 stars. So I hope you find new books that you can add to your TBR, which is probably ever growing just like mine. My bookshelf is kind of empty right now on some of the sides because I had to take some books off for the video. So I think I'll start with standalone because sometimes you're just in the mood for a good standalone and you don't want to get involved in a series even though series are so good as well, but I'll start with that. Ooh, I think I'll start with one that I just finished and I actually just gave to my mom to read, and she's only 7 pages in, but she said, yeah, it's pretty good so far. So Five Survive by Holly Jackson. And out of all the books, honestly, this one I might have seen somewhat often, but people don't really like talk about it that much. They just either have it in like wrap-ups or something. But if you loved the Good Girls Guide to Murder series, this is like that, but this is by the same author. But it's more like scary and like thrillerish, but it's still young adult. So basically, it's about these 6 kids who they go on not a field trip. They go on a trip in spring break on an RV, and they're all like related somehow. Not like related, but they all know each other somehow. But some they know more than others. Like the main girl's name is Red. She has her best friend Maddie. Maddie's older brother Oliver is on the trip, along with Oliver's girlfriend Raina, and then 2 other guys they know from school. Well, one guy they know from school, Simon, and then Simon's friend Arthur, who goes to a different school. So suddenly their RV, like a wheel gets popped or something, so they all get out to try and fix it, and then they realize the wheel was shot. And then there's someone shooting at them from the forest, and there's a walkie-talkie, and it's like, one of you guys has a secret, and you must tell me what that secret is before 6 a.m., or all of you will get shot and die. So there's lots of tension, lots of like, oh my gosh, you're on the edge of your seat. It's so good. So many reveals, and the reveals make you be like, oh my gosh. But then you're like, that makes so much sense because of all the foreshadowing. I rated this book 5 stars. It is such a good young adult thriller. So if you're looking for a great summery young adult thriller, because they're on like a senior trip, I think it's technically during spring break, but it can feel like it's during summer as well too, because they only mention it's during spring break like a couple of times, but it is so good. All the characters, everything. There's a character in there here that you'll absolutely hate by the end. If you read this, you know, but highly recommend putting this on your list. It is new, just came out, I think this year. Yeah, I think it was this year. 2022, so last year, but highly recommend. Okay. The next one, technically, I guess it's not a standalone, because there's like, it can be read as a standalone, but apparently there's another book coming out that's about the main character's younger sister. So this book, I've not heard like anyone talk about, and why. It is so good. I read it last year. It was, I think, my first book that I read last year, and my first 5 stars, and it's called A House of Salt and Sorrows. So, kind of like on the thriller side, this is a dark fantasy, which is kind of like almost if you took a thriller and you put it in a fantasy world, which is amazing because I love fantasy and I love thrillers. This was my first dark fantasy I've ever read, and I got it recommended to me by my friend. We were at this thing called The Haunt, which is like our local amusement park puts it on, and we were talking about books we read, and she was like, I just read the creepiest, best fantasy book called A House of Salt and Sorrows, and I was immediately hooked by her words, and I put it on my Christmas list, and then I got it, and I immediately read it. So A House of Salt and Sorrows is about a girl named Annalie, and she's one of the 12 dancing princesses. It's kind of like a retelling. So they all live in this house by the sea. Like, and they're not princesses in here, but their dad's like a lord of like the land and like whatever, and all the princesses keep dying. So like it opens with one of the princesses dead. I forget, was it Eulalie? Eulalie dies and she like falls off a cliff, and the main character doesn't think it's an accident, but she also doesn't think that they're cursed, because everyone thinks they're cursed, because every year another sister dies. So she kind of starts investigating into that, and it is so creepy. By the end, I think I binged the end of it in one sitting. I like got to maybe like halfway through, and then I could not put it down. It is so good. And then I let my other friend borrow it, and she loved it as well and also rated it 5 stars, but I never see anyone talking about this, and why? So apparently it's not like a standalone. It can be, because this is Annalie's story and her end of the story here, but I'm actually pretty excited because there's another kind of like sequel in the same world about her younger sister Verity when Verity's older, and the sequel is called A House of Roots and Ruins, and it is coming out in July, I think, at the end of July, right before my birthday, so maybe I'll get it for that, but I'm so excited to read that as well. But if you wanted to treat this as a standalone, you totally can. The whole story's wrapped up in this book. Annalie's, like, by the end, her whole story's done. But as you go on, it just gets creepier and creepier. So if you love thrillers, but you haven't gotten into fantasy, I think this is the perfect place to start. And even if you like horror, because there's, like, I don't like horror that much, but there's a little bit of those elements. But if you love fantasy and you want to get into thrillers, also a great place to start. Or even if you don't like thrillers or anything, like my one friend who read this, she doesn't really read a lot of thrillers. She's more reading romance and everything, and she doesn't even like fantasy that much. But she loved this book, so that just goes to show. I think you should give it a try. And then another one, I think I randomly picked up at my sister's Scholastic Book Fair, because I was there watching her musical and they had out the book fair and I was looking through it, and this immediately intrigued me. Four Dead Queens. So I read this maybe 2-3 years ago, and wait, this is kind of funny because it's like a mystery in a fantasy world. Are we seeing a theme here? Are we seeing what my two favorite genres are? Thrillers and fantasy? And when they're combined, I love them so much. But anyway, these queens keep dying. And there's the main girl, Carolee, Annalie, even they sound the same. But she basically, it's kind of like, it's like fantasy, but it's in the future almost. Like they have futuristic technology and they have these little tablets where if you like put them on your tongue, you can kind of see memories. So she's kind of like a thief, and she like steals lots of things to get by and everything. And this one guy was after her. What's his name? I forgot his name. Varen. Varen was after her, trying to get it back because he was a messenger trying to take this to someone. And to keep him from getting it, she puts it on her tongue to see the memories. And the memories are of someone killing the 4 queens who are in charge of their kingdom. So basically there's like 4 different sections of their kingdom. There's Archaea, Ionia, Toria, and Ludia, and each of the queens rule a different thing. So you can see each of the queens there. So it's kind of cool seeing the world building and everything, but it's so high stakes, so like fast paced. Her and Varen now are working together and they're trying to get into the castle to try and stop the murdering from taking place. But then people are starting to like question Carolee and starting to suspect her of murdering them, because she knows so many details. But that's only because she saw the memory, but it wasn't really a memory. Like she's trying to get in and figure out what happened. I don't know. I'm not explaining this well, but it is so good. And there's a big plot twist and it is crazy. But so she's trying to help them and people are starting to suspect her of murdering them because she knows all the details, like I was saying before. But she's like, no, I only know the details because I stole that like little disc thing. I don't know, the memory, whatever it's called. And it's just really, really good. And then Varen even starts to suspect her. And she's like, no, Varen, it wasn't me. And highly recommend. It's very fast-paced. It's like a quick book. I mean, it's about 400 pages, but I got through it pretty quickly. Although I am a fast reader, but highly recommend. The other one I don't have here, and kind of following the same vein. It's called The Wicked Deep. It's about this one girl. She lives in this town where every year 3 witches that were drowned in this town years and years before possess 3 of the girls, and each of them kill a boy from the town to like get revenge. Are we seeing a similar pattern here? I think we are, but anyway. So then this one guy comes into town because his brother was killed like the year before, and he's trying to investigate it. And she's like, "What are you doing here? Why are you in town now? You're like the age range of like the girls who like kill the boys and everything." So he's trying to investigate it, and she's trying to help him, but it's kind of like a witch hunt because there's these other boys in town who are trying to figure out which of the girls are the witches and like kill them, because I think that will get rid of the witches once and for all. But they're just girls possessed by the witches' spirits, so she's trying to stop that from happening. And there's a big plot twist in this as well. But all the plot twists in these books are foreshadowed so well, where you like don't really guess it. At least I didn't, but then it happens and you're like, "Oh, that makes so much sense." So those are the 4 standalone books. I love them all so much. And then there's The Wicked Deep as well. But now onto the series. The series are a little bit different than the like thriller, mystery, fantasies. So the first series I just read. If you have seen my other vlogs, videos, whatever, then you probably know what I'm about to say. And that is the Skyward series by Brandon Sanderson. I have all 3 of the books here, and they are so good. I've not read much young adult sci-fi, but this was so good. I loved the main character, Spensa. She is such a strong protagonist, but she also has her flaws as well, which is needed. And you can see her character development slowly over the first book, over the second book, kind of over the third book. I feel like the first 2 books did it better than this one, but I rated these all 5 stars. I rated these all 5 stars as well, but... Anyway, so basically the first book is about a girl named Spensa. Her and the other humans are trapped on this planet because there's these aliens called the Krell, and whenever they get too far up towards the surface, the Krell will attack. Sometimes the Krell will attack unprovoked. So she wants to be a pilot and help fight off the Krell. But there's one problem. She can't be a pilot because her dad was known as a coward because he ran from battle and got shot down by his own side because he ran from battle. So despite all this, she is trying to go in there and be a pilot anyway, because this has been her dream ever since she was little. And the friendship she formed, and even the main antagonist in here, you can see why she didn't want to have Spensa as like a pilot. And it's like not just an antagonist who's like bad for bad's sake, but it's so good. This first book kind of takes place on her own planet, but then the second book takes place like out in the universe, and you get to see the other like alien species and how they do things different out there, and it's so good. And then the third book, you're in a different setting in some place called like the Nowhere, and she's starting to realize that she's kind of different than other people. Not in a way where it's like, I'm not like other girls. No, like she has what people call like a defect, and through this book series, I think there's going to be 4. It's like the Skyward Saga. The 4th book's not coming out till November, and the 3rd book ended on a cliffhanger, so I am waiting anxiously for that. But she's kind of grappling with what that means and what happened to her dad, and if he really was a coward or did something else happen. And you can see so much of her character development. This is my first time reading Brandon Sanderson, and it was so good. I don't think he writes a lot of young adult, but I am so desperate to find another sci-fi series like this. So if you know another sci-fi series like Skyward, then please comment it down below, because I really enjoyed this. And I've read sci-fi before, but I just love young adult, and I love following Spensa, and I love all of this. And also, did I mention I got this book at my library for $2, and this book for $3, and then this book I got for $10, but still, $10 for a hardcover? This one was off of Amazon. So, I love these books. They're so good. And I highly recommend, even if you don't normally gravitate towards sci-fi, this isn't like super hard to understand sci-fi. I think it's about the same amount of world building as like, your average young adult fantasy. Maybe a tiny bit more, but there's nothing that you can't understand that much. So I love this series. It deserves a lot more hype. The next one is by one of my favorite authors, I guess, although I didn't like her newest book, but Marissa Meyer, and it's called Renegades. So I don't know why TikTok, like Book Talk or whatever, I'm not on TikTok, but hasn't got their like hands on this book series yet, because it seems totally up like the alley of a lot of people. Literally a supervillain girl and a superhero boy, and she goes undercover as a superhero and goes in and like is still working for the supervillains. Her name's Nova, and he starts to fall in love with her, she starts to fall in love with him, but she has the secret that she's not really a superhero, she's a super villain. And it's like their whole story, but also what really, you kind of see the downfalls of both the villains and even the heroes. I mean, I agree more with what the heroes are doing, obviously, but you kind of start to see like, wait, do the villains kind of have a point about this point? Not in the way that they're going about it, but it's just so good. And you see her grappling with like what's right and what's wrong, and how she loves him, but she doesn't want to admit it because like they can never be together, forbidden romance. Like, why is this not more popular? That's my question. I feel like everyone, like so many people would love it. It's like, because it's superheroes and supervillains, but then there's a romance between the superhero and the supervillain. So it's a whole trilogy right here. There's Renegades, there's Arch Enemies, and then there's Supernova. So basically, I kind of gave a little bit of a description, but the girl's name is Nova, and everyone has a supervillain name or like a superhero name. So her name is Nova, but her name really is Nightmare. And she has the ability to like touch people and put them to sleep, or like, and she doesn't have to sleep herself. And then the boy's name is Adrian, and his superhero name is Sketch. He has one of the coolest powers ever. As an artist myself, I would love to have it. Whatever he draws comes to life. So he draws a sword, he pulls it out of the paper. Well, actually, he'd probably draw it on metal and then pull it out of the metal, because then the sword would be metal. If he pulled it out of the paper, it'd just be made out of paper. So it's kind of like, it's so cool. And his intentions like create these things, and he has such a cool power. But she goes undercover as Insomnia, which is just basically a superhero who doesn't need to sleep. And she gets recruited to Sketch's team. So they have little like units of superheroes. So his team has Monarch, a girl named Dana, who can turn into butterflies and then come back together. If one of her butterflies like gets like killed or something, then like she'll have like a scar. But if it's trapped somewhere, then she can't form back together. There's a girl named Ruby. She's, I think, the red assassin, where whenever she's like cut, like her blood turns to rubies. Like, so she can like cut herself and then create rubies and use that as like something. There is, Smokescreen or something. Is that his name? Let me find it. They have it all here. Yeah, Smokescreen. So there's a guy named Oscar who's Smokescreen. He can summon smoke and vapor at will. So that's kind of their little team. And then there's like Adrian. Basically, he is the son of the top two, like, of the two superheroes. The one guy, like, he created the whole Renegades. He brought the city back from, like, the mafia gangs and everything. And her uncle is the main super villain, although he, like, died before. So now she's with the super villains. So it's kind of, like, very forbidden. But it's so good to see her story and everything. I think it's super fast-paced, super easy to read. I think it's technically categorized as, like, a dystopian, but it's not like a normal dystopian like you'd think. So I highly recommend, even if you don't normally like Marvel and superheroes and everything, if you do like Marvel and superheroes and everything, and you like that type of forbidden romance and everything, definitely check this out. But even if you don't like romance, like I wasn't the biggest romance reader, I loved this. Adrian and Nova were so cute together. But so yeah, that's the Renegade series. The other series I don't have, but it's also by Marissa Myers, and I've heard people more talking about this one, The Lunar Chronicles, but I don't think it's talked about enough, especially now. I think it was very popular years ago, but I think it's still such a good series. I don't have it with me because I borrowed it from the library, and I wanted to get my own copies, but I honestly don't love the new covers. So if that's what's throwing you off, then don't let it throw you off. Just go to the library and get a copy. But I think I read Lunar Chronicles like 3 times, maybe twice. I read it once in middle school, and then I think once or twice in high school. But it was so good, and maybe I need to read it another time. Basically, I think if you've heard of Lunar Chronicles, which I know, I feel like people have, but like you might not have, so it's basically retellings of fairy tale stories. So the first one is Cinder, it's about Cinderella. The second one's Scarlet, it's about Little Red Riding Hood. Then there's Crest, which is Rapunzel, and Winter, which is Snow White. So basically, this takes place in the future. It's sci-fi. I know, the second sci-fi series, these are the only 2 young adult sci-fi series I've read, and I love them both. So this one's more, not as much like sci-fi like this. Like, I feel like Skyward and all that, true sci-fi. This is more like the fairy tale, like, it takes place on Earth and on the moon, and that's it, just between those 2. So the people on the moon, they kind of have special powers. There's someone named Levana, who she's the queen of there, and she's trying to marry the prince of I forget what it's called, but I think it's like, is it New Beijing or something? Somewhere like that. His name's Kai. He's basically the Prince Charming or whatever. But Cinderella, or Cinder, is a cyborg, and she goes to the ball. She has like the stepsisters and everything, and she loses her foot. I know, because she has a cyborg, like a robot foot. And it kind of just revolves from there. Like, it's a whole adventure. Her story intertwines with Scarlet from the second book, intertwines with Crest. They're trying to stop Levana, the like evil person queen from the moon. It's so good. Highly recommend if you like fairy tale retellings. If you like sci-fi, even if you don't. If you like fantasy, because I feel like it's kind of like fantasy, but, you know, in the future, on Earth, with cyborgs. But anyway, if you're looking for more, just like classic fantasy, I highly recommend the Demon King series. So I read the first book twice, and then the rest of the books once, except I haven't read the 4th book yet. But these are like your classic fantasy, like very classic. Like, there's the main character, and it's something with an R, I think. Raisa, and then a guy named Han Alistair. And Raisa is the princess, and Han is like, he's kind of like a thief, but he's also gets looked after by the people who are kind of like the Native Americans of the land sometimes. But he finds this right here, which is this amulet that like wizards use, and he figures out he's kind of like a wizard, and it kind of like goes from there, and it goes crazy. It is really good. There's like political intrigue, like the whole fantasy type thing. One, they both go to school. I think that was that the second one? Yeah, they go to the school Mistwork, and then like the third one, like Raisa is like trying to like grapple with becoming queen and all that. And it's just like your classic fantasy. I don't know. It's kind of like, it would take a lot to go deep into the plot and everything, but I really enjoyed it. I think I rated all these around 4.5 because they weren't quite 5 stars for me, but they were very, very good. And if that classic fantasy is your thing, highly recommend this series. Can't wait to read the 4th book, but I kind of read the second and third book right after one another, so I kind of had to take a break from like that, like hard set in stone fantasy world, you know. But highly recommend. And I don't know why it's not more talked about if you're very much into like classic fantasy and everything. And yeah, I think we're done. That's it. That's all of it. So hopefully you found a book in here that you thought sounded good, that you hadn't heard about before. And if you have read any of these, please comment down below what you thought. And if you know of any more young adult sci-fi, please comment that down below, because I would love to try some more out, seeing as I loved the Skyward series and I also loved Lunar Chronicles. So yeah, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!